I refuse. I refuse to believe it. I'm still holding out this show gets saved. Hashtag save Swamp Thing. What is up, Fleek fans, and welcome back to my channel. So I actually did individual reviews for the first few episodes of Swamp Thing. Then things got hectic and busy, I fell off, but I promised to come back and do a season/series review at this point of Swamp Thing, and that's what we're doing today. I'm going to be talking about this show. I'm going to refrain from spoiling the final episode, but I am going to talk about elements of the season as a whole. I need you guys down in the comments below. Did you enjoy this interpretation, and what has been your favorite interpretation of Swamp Thing so far? Let's talk about this series. So Abby Arcane returns home to Louisiana to investigate a deadly swamp-borne virus, only to discover the dark, terrifying mysteries of the swamp. So this season started out on a very strong note. They hinted at certain things that could come later on in the season, and of course hinted at certain things that did not end up coming but were supposed to come in a season later on, but still things that paid off on all of my expectations. And I have to say that the end of the season was just as compelling as the beginning. Now, I still enjoy probably the first 4 or 5 episodes a bit more than I do the final 4 or 5 episodes, even though things amp up and they get more intense, and there is a lot of Swamp Thing goodness in there, a lot of body horror, and really intense, not action, but intense scenes and imagery with what Swamp Thing brings us in a show like this. All of those things paid off, and the season as a whole, I thought, was really, really great. Now, one of the reasons why DC apparently, and this is all still just rumor and speculation, canceled the show is because they wanted to make this character, or characters that they're focusing on within that universe, more like the shows on the CW. And I'm not saying I have anything against the CW, but what Swamp Thing did for us as fans of this show, hopefully, and what the character was something so distinct, was something so separated from other things that we've seen in the DC, really animated or television world, and so different from what we're getting in the movies. And I just loved this interpretation of this character. This character is broken. He just wants to know what it's like to be a human again. And this entire season was a lot different than what I expected. I anticipated way more action. I anticipated way more horror. Now, there is horror in there, absolutely, and we'll get into the special effects and the body horror and all of those things shortly, but it's more the conversations of the characters and really the character developments, a lot of great arcs in this season to a lot of characters that aren't our main character of Alec as Swamp Thing. He is there and he is present, but he may not necessarily be the main character of every episode, and that's something that is going to turn a lot of people away. You may get into episodes 6 and 7 and you're like, okay, why have I been watching this the whole time? You're kind of focusing on the character of Abby, and then you're building the storyline up of Avery, both played by incredible actors, by the way, but those storylines for me were still interesting. If we were focusing on things that weren't as interesting, I'd be like, all right, let's get back to Swamp Thing. But you're building up this villainous character. You're building up kind of this partner in crime. You have the doctor, the character of Jason, who comes in and starts performing all of his operations towards the end, really hearkening back to a movie like The Thing, especially when he was pulling out body parts of the character of Swamp Thing. I'm like, this is really weird, and once again, not what I expected from this show, but it was awesome at the same time. And let's go ahead and get into the practical effects, because my God, the CGI was really good. There were moments towards the end when I'm like, the CGI is not as good here as it is here, but it's still, for a show with this budget, it's awesome. Then you mix that with the practical effects, and the practical effects in this show were beyond phenomenal. Derek Mears plays the character of Swamp Thing. He's the guy that's in all of the makeup, in the costume, if you will. I am sure it took him a long time to get this costume on, but just the look of Swamp Thing when he first appears, it's incredible, and you feel like this holy entity just appeared on screen, and it really did give me chills every time he popped up on screen, whether it's the voice or it may just be the looks. Regardless, I loved the character of Swamp Thing. We got him. I don't think we got as much as I wanted of him, but everything that we got was great, and this is just one giant origin story. You have to keep that in mind. Well, Swamp Thing didn't really do a lot. He only tore a few people in half and only fought a couple of bad guys. Well, yeah, I understand that, but once again, we were just kind of building up to who this character should be or should have been in the future, and that's why this season worked. It is the proper origin story for the Swamp Thing, and if you're asking me, Austin, what is your favorite interpretation of this character you have seen so far, whether it's animated form or live action, this is the best I've ever seen Swamp Thing. It's what I want from a show like this. Now, let's get into these side characters really quick. Like I said, the Doctor, the character of Jason, he's really sinister when he needs to be. You still care about him. At the beginning, I thought his character was going to go in a different direction. He ended up going in kind of the predictable direction, but it was still interesting. Avery is who I want to talk about, played by Will Patton, and you knew the first time you saw him, all right, this guy's clearly up to no good. And then what happens to him happens, and he turns into something different, and it is just so fascinating how characters in this show can turn on each other so quick, one, but two, can make decisions that are just flat out irrational to the audience, but for the character, the motivation carries them to make that decision. Every character has a distinct motivation. When you get into the end, the final few episodes, there is this climactic event that happens. Swamp Thing gets captured. They have to go after Swamp Thing. And then there are things happening on the side. Maybe a character is able to see what's going to happen in the future, or he's seeing alternate versions of the future. You might be saying to yourself, well, that got a little weird. It got a bit outlandish, but they're really bringing in characters. Blue Devil from the DC Comics. I mean, the incorporation of certain characters towards the end of the season were completely unexpected. I mean, I knew they would kind of harken back to the comics and do things that were entertaining to fans of Swamp Thing since the beginning, but I didn't know they were going to go that nerdy and geeky and just awesome. Everything you want in a Swamp Thing TV show, they provided us. I think the focus was there for the most part. Every now and then they focused a bit too much. When I said the conversations were great, they were great. And I loved how each character had an arc. But every now and then you'd get a conversation that would last a bit too long. There were certain characters dealing with loss and death in their lives. I'm like, yeah, maybe we could shift to something else. And then there's one storyline towards the beginning of the season that was hit on really hard. And then subsequent episodes, you just start kind of forgetting about that storyline. I'm like, what happened here? I want to go back to that. So it's not a perfect season of television, but for what it was striving for and the fact that it's so different from any other superhero-esque show on TV, on any streaming platform, I have to give it just mad props and kudos for going for it. This is James Wan, who executive produced this show, like I said. So you know it's going to veer into that horror territory. There are absolutely horror elements in there, not necessarily jump scares, just scary moments, grotesque imagery, the haunting factor. Maybe it's the cinematography, maybe it's the color correction, maybe it's just the way the camera pans or zooms when it needs to build suspense, or it's just Swamp Thing coming out of the mist and the darkness, walking out of the water. I mean, every time that happened, mixed with the voice, and the voice was just on point. It is everything you want from Swamp Thing, and it's one of my favorite superhero characters that I've seen, frankly, on screen all year because I am just so interested in what this character was in this representation, and that's one reason why I am so upset. I'm so sad that this is the only season we were getting. It's like getting an origin story for like a Spider-Man or a Batman if you're a massive fan of Swamp Thing, and never getting the payoff because fans of this show, unfortunately, at this point, will not get the payoff. Now, there are still things we can do. We can still tweet. We can still ask HBO. I mean, HBO Max is possibly going to take over the DC Universe because I don't think the DC Universe is in good shape, so they're going to absorb those shows. Maybe we can get an HBO to start back up a season 2 of Swamp Thing. I think all of the actors are there for it, and there are so many character arcs towards the end of the season. I'm like, I'm interested to see where this is going to go. I know they're not going to give me a payoff in this season. For a lot of things they do. It's definitely an end in episode 10. But it's not the end that I want. Nothing against the show. This does not impede on the quality because I thoroughly enjoyed it, had a great time with it, love the character of Alec, love the character of Abby, and at the end of the day, Swamp Thing is a great show on television. I'm going to go 84% for Swamp Thing. My goodness, guys, everything James Wan promised us, he gave us. I had a great time with it, loved catching up on this series, and if there are any thoughts, specific details, or just hidden gems within the series that you guys would like to share in the comments down below, below. If it's full of like crazy spoilers, be sure to put a spoiler title and then do a couple of spaces. But really, this is your place and space to talk Swamp Thing, man. Spread the word. Make people go and watch this show. All we can do is try. And I really, really hope to see more of this. My goodness, I loved it. It was an absolute thrill. Thank you so much for watching this video. Today is a day full of reviews, and another tier list is on the way. You guys are the best, and I'll see you soon.